Hello, I'm Mr. Black, and today we're going to be talking about place value. I had someone mention in a comment on a previous video about what we would call a number that's behind a decimal. We all know normal place values: ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, 100,000, millions, billions, trillions, and go on and on and on. But what do we call the numbers that are behind a decimal? So let's take a look and see what that looks like. So let's say we've got 0.1. Okay, so now we've got 0.1. That is in the 10th spot. The reason it's in the 10th spot is because if I multiply this number by 10, I get a dollar. Just like if this was money. Let's say we've got 10 cents here. If I multiply 10 cents by 10, I end up with a dollar or one here. Okay, so now I've got my 10 here. If I just multiply this by 10, I end up with a dollar. So let's see how that looks. Okay, so if I multiply this, because I have 1 0 here, and I'm dealing with ones, anytime I multiply anything with a zero like 10, 100, 1,000, all I have to do is when I'm multiplying, I move the decimal over one space for every zero. If I have 100 here, I move this decimal over 2 spaces. If I have 1,000, I move it over 3, and so forth. Okay, now this can also be written out as 1/10 in a fraction form. Okay, any of these numbers can be written out as a fraction, whether it's a whole number, whether it's a decimal. In this case, 1/10 is can be written out as a fraction. Now, let's say I've got 2 spaces behind that. So let's see what that looks like. Okay, so now we've got 0.01. Just like if we were dealing with money, this would be in the penny spot or the 1 cent spot. And I know that if I multiply this by 100, I end up with $1. Just like if I multiply this 10 by this 10 spot by 10, I end up with $1. So let's see how that looks like. Okay, so now because I've got 2 zeros here, I can just multiply this and move that decimal over 2 spots and make this a whole number. Okay, it can also be written as 1/100th, and let's see what that looks like. Okay, so now we've got 1/100th. So we've converted this decimal into a fraction, and we've got our number here, and if we multiply it by 100, we get a whole number. So that's the 100th spot. Now let's see what a 1,000th spot looks like. Okay, so now we've got our 1,000th spot. So if I multiply this by 1,000, I'm going to end up with a whole number, or a 1 here in this case, because 1 times 1,000 gives me 1. So this is in the 1,000th spot. Now, if I turn it into a fraction, this is what it would look like. Okay, so now I've got 1/1,000. The same as saying 1/1,000th here, or 1,000th place value. Now, let's say we've got one more number out there. So let's take a look and see what that looks like. Okay, so now I've got another decimal place out here. This is in the 10,000 spot. So if I multiply this by 10,000, I'm going to end up with a whole number here. Okay, it also can be written as a fraction, 1/10,000. So let's see what that looks like. Okay, so now I've got my fraction here, 1/10,000, and it's the same as saying this here, this here. So if I multiply these by 10,000, I end up with a whole number, or in this case, I'll end up with a 1. Okay, now let's put another 0 out there. And you probably won't have to go this far out, but it's good to know where your place value is. I'll do a couple more. So let's put one more 0 on the board here. Okay, so now I've got another spot out here. This is in my 100,000th place. So if I multiply this by 100,000, I end up with a 1. Okay, I can also write this as a fraction, just like this here. Okay, so now I've got 1/100,000. Now let's go out. I usually don't go out beyond this point, but let's say we've got one more to add here. So let's go ahead and add one more 0 to it. Okay, so now I've got this is in my million spot. The reason I know that is because I multiply 1 million to this, I'm going to end up with a whole number here, or a 1. It can also be rewritten as a fraction, and I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so now I've got the fraction 1/1,000,000th, and I also have a millionth out here. That is in the million spot. So to go back and review, so we've got tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s, millions. And remember, if you notice, they all have a th at the end, millions. Because if I say million, that is a whole number, but millionth is a decimal. Same thing with tenths. If I have 10, that's a whole number, but if I have tenths, that's part of a number or a tenth of something. Same thing with hundredths. So anyway, so that concludes our video on decimal placement. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments below. And as always, please like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video. Thank you.